I'm with Port to Port Cruises and Wildlife Tours, Rachel McGregor, the skipper and cruise and wildlife operator. Hello, Rachel.
Hi.
So you're based in Port Chalmers in Dunedin, but you weren't always in Dunedin. You grew up, or you were born in another country. Can you tell us about that and early beginnings with wildlife?
Yep. So I was born in Canada, Vancouver Island, so Victoria, and I was there until I was about 7. My dad was born in Dunedin. My mum was born in Mexico. And so they went over to Canada and had myself and my 2 brothers over there. So we spent about 7 or 8 years over there. My older brother was, so he was there for 8 years. And we came over here to Dunedin to grow up. My parents thought it was a good place for us to grow up. And I suppose being around the water, people often assume that I must come from a boating family, and I didn't really. But we did have a couple of little boats that we just kind of messed around in. We would see quite a lot of wildlife in Canada, so I've always really liked the wildlife. When I was little, I assumed that I would be a vet when I grew up, because when you're a kid, you don't really realise that there's actually other things that you can do as well if you like animals. So that's where the wildlife sort of started for me, was from when I was really little, just looking at things in Canada like squirrels and beavers and frogs and all that sort of thing out in the wild. So I guess in some ways it led me to what I do now, except that along the way there's been other things that have happened. The boating came in quite a lot later. But I feel that everything in my life has sort of led to this. I feel like I am where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So you, let's Scooby-Doo a few years forward. So you were working out at the Taiaroa Heads there for a while. Can you tell us what you were up to and what sort of things you were seeing daily?
Yeah. So when I first started working at Taiaroa Head, I was working there as a guide. I was 24 years old, and I was guiding tourists to the observation area to see the albatross. I'd never actually seen an albatross before in my life, before I started working there. So I learned pretty quick. I then went on to work for a cruise company, also viewing albatross, but from the water. So I was working for them for about 9 years, and in the meantime, I'd worked on other boats, also out at Taiaroa Head, but doing other things, like dredging. I worked on the dredger for about 4 years, and I was on the Coast Guard boat as well. So I've always kind of based myself around Taiaroa Head and the Otago.
All right. So Taiaroa Heads is a very special part of the world.
Harbour since, and so I feel like that's my spot.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, I got my phone ringing.
So,
there we go.
That's right. We can pause if you need to grab that.
Oh, no, you're all good. Yeah, I'm just a one-woman show at the moment, so.
Yeah, I know the feeling. So I'll edit that bit out. No worries. So Taiaroa Heads, for those that might be new to Dunedin, the harbour in Dunedin is 30 kilometres long. And at the end of the harbour, or the mouth of the harbour, there's Taiaroa Heads. Now, it's a very special place. Sir David Attenborough named it the wildlife capital of the world, because there's a lot going on there. So around the Taiaroa Heads, can you name some of the species that people might see in the course of a cruise or a tour?
Yep, so we do 2-hour cruises. So there's quite a lot of time to see what lives there. Taiaroa Head it's a nature reserve. It's where the albatross breed, but there's quite a few different species of bird and animal that have benefited from the fact that the headland is fenced in. So as well as the northern royal albatross, there's other animals too, like the fur seals. You'll always see fur seals if you go to Taiaroa Head. There's 3 types of shag that you'll always see. There's wading birds, so the royal spoonbills, the oyster catchers. So those are the things that are always there. And then there's other things that visit, such as dolphins. Sometimes you'll get Hector's dolphins, dusky dolphins. Occasionally you'll get bottlenose dolphins. You get visiting penguins at certain times of the year that come and molt here. But there's also penguins that breed here as well. The blue penguins breed there. They're harder to find. We usually see them probably on about 80% of our cruises. We would see blue penguins, but we don't ever say that we definitely will, because as you know, the wildlife does what it wants.
Yeah.
But that's probably part of the excitement.
Yeah.
But yeah, they say that there's about 10,000 seabirds that breed on Tyrrell Head, so only about 2% of those are actually albatross. We get lots of visiting species of albatross as well that just come and feed nearby.
Okay. So for the uninitiated, I've often gone out there and I've looked up at the birds flying and I've gone, oh, there's an albatross, but no, it's a seagull. And when you do see an albatross, what is the standout feature versus a seagull?
Because the size is actually quite hard to get a good perspective on unless you see an albatross flying past one of the buildings up there, like the lighthouse or the observation.
Yeah.
So if you can get a size, something to gauge the size on,
yeah.
But they also have very long, slender wings, very different to the seagulls, and the way that they flap their wings when they flap, they don't always flap, is quite different. It's more of a it's a graceful kind of a wave almost, rather than the kind of clumsy flapping of a seagull with the bend in the middle. Yes, it's a long glide is usually what they do, but when they flap, it's a different type.
Yeah. So I believe they get to 3 meters wingspan, which is pretty big. So they must be enormously efficient gliders. And I understand the Tyrrell Heads is the only piece of land that they actually touch on their journey around the world, which may take maybe 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, around 20,000 kilometers. Then they return to the same spot. And I understand they have a partner for life as well.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. So the albatross chicks, so you've mentioned a few things. So if we sort of go back to the first thing you said about the albatross having a wingspan of 3 meters, the chicks actually have a wingspan of 3 meters at 8 months of age, which is when they fledge. So they go out to sea for the very first time. They're actually away for about 5 years, some of them. They don't touch land at all for that 5 years. When they do come back, then they find a partner, which takes another 5 years, and they usually settle down with a lifelong partner from about the age of 10. They'll start breeding. They're quite a long-lived bird, so they can live to more than 50 years of age, but on average, it's about 30 to 40 years old. And they do fly right around to the other side of the world and back. Spending most of their lives out at sea, about 90% of their lives are spent out at sea, only coming back to land to lay eggs and incubate them, which is every second year.
Right. Okay. So I understand recently there was a lot of krill in the harbour. And so what happens when there's a lot of krill?
So when there's a lot of krill in the harbour, which is Munida, it's a little red lobster, then you end up with a lot of red poo everywhere from the seagulls. So that's usually the first indication that we've got lots of krill.
Yeah.
So that means there's a lot of food, because the krill are right at the bottom of the food chain,
yeah.
Which means that there's a lot of wildlife, which there always is anyway, but it's really an important food source for the smallest of the fish right up to the largest of the marine mammals, like the baleen whales. So that's usually when you see, if you're going to see humpback whales feeding, that's when you'll see them, is when there's lots of krill around.
Right. Have you ever seen a whale come into the harbour?
Yeah, several times. Yeah, I've seen humpback whales come in, southern right whales, recently the orca, which are actually the world's largest dolphin, but people call them killer whales.
Yeah.
So we had those recently.
All right. And we talked about this offline, but what do you think the orcas were interested in when they came inside the harbour?
When we saw them, it looked first of all like they were just travelling, and then we realised that they were very close to the sand flats. So after talking to the orca researcher, we think that they were looking for rays, because that's one of their main food sources are the rays. Yeah, so we think that's probably what they were doing. Stingrays.
So stingrays are potato chips for orcas. So I I'm led to believe. So that's wonderful, and I think that really speaks to your description. Really speaks to how rich the wildlife is. Now, in any given cruise or trip, can you see all of these?
Yeah. I give people a wildlife sheet to take home because over the course of the 2 hours, there's a lot that we see. And like I say at the start to them, I say, you know, we're going to see a lot of wildlife, a lot of birds. You don't need to try and remember all their names because at the end of the trip, I give them a wildlife sheet to take away, which I tick everything we've seen.
Yeah.
So usually it's about 17 or 18 different types of animal that we see. And yeah, I mean, we've had, you know, 20, 22 different species of animal. A poor trip, one where what I would call poor, which is still amazing because everyone still really enjoys it, would be maybe 14 to 15 or 16 different species. Yeah, usually it's about 18 different species of animal we see.
Really good. So can we talk about the MV Sooty, your vessel? I understand it was custom built. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yep. So MV stands for motor vessel for people that don't know. So it's the MV Sooty Chaser. It's a custom build Osprey. So Osprey is the type of boat, like you get Maclay's and lots of other different types of boat. Ospreys are built in Nelson at the top of the South Island here in New Zealand. It's a trailer boat, so I take it out of the water every day and it's towed by a Land Cruiser. On the trailer, it weighs 3.5 tonne, which is the maximum for being able to use a vehicle like a Land Cruiser to tow it without needing a truck. So it's 8.8 metres long, which is pretty big. It's usually the biggest boat at the boat ramp. I think only a couple of times there's been a bigger one. It's 2.8 metres wide, which is wider than most boats. Most boats are 2.5, which is your normal road width. It's powered by a 300 horsepower Yamaha engine. And yeah, she's pretty thirsty. I can take 20 people at a time. There's seats for 20. Usually on a wildlife cruise, I would only take 12, just so that people have their own space and don't feel like they need to be outside if they don't want to be. There's room inside for everybody.
Okay. So aside from that, you're also doing ferry crossing. So you're crossing from Portobello to Port Chalmers, which if you drive from Portobello to Port Chalmers, it's 60 kilometres. You've got to go all the way around because it's a very long harbour. So what are some of the reasons people would cross from Portobello to Port Chalmers and vice versa?
Yeah, so as you say, it is a very long drive. So it is 60 kilometres there and back, or 30 kilometres each way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people now that are taking their bikes across because we've got this really amazing cycleway that's been constructed. Yep. That the council has invested a lot of money into. So that's taken quite a few years. It's not quite finished, but it's almost there.
Yes.
So the cycle loop is really popular. People will take their electric bikes or their mountain or road bikes. We can take 15 bikes at a time. And then that way they can cycle across from Portobello to Port Chalmers, go across by ferry and do the whole loop. People go for coffee, children go to the playground on the other side. There's also an island halfway across the harbour, which is called Quarantine Island, and it was actually used as a quarantine station. So there's a lot of people who go and visit Quarantine Island. Just for a couple of hours is enough to have a look around. There's some old shipwrecks there that are really interesting.
Let's just touch on that for a moment because a fair bit of the world's in quarantine. So New Zealand was settled around about 1840, and Dunedin was a Presbyterian settlement. Christchurch was Anglican, and the first stopping point was Quarantine Island, where I believe they spent a month just to make sure they hadn't picked up tuberculosis, smallpox, or anything like that. And then once they got the all clear, they were able to get on with their lives and move into the city or the farmland. So it's very interesting that here we are, some 180 years on, and we know what quarantine looks like. So it's a very interesting piece of history. Very interesting that that's kind of repeated, and now people unfortunately have a personal experience of what that would look like. So that's really interesting. So some of the other things you do, there's a beautiful indoor stadium in Dunedin, where they have concerts or rugby games. Now you've got involved with that. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so Forsyth Bar Stadium has got a roof on it, which we need in Dunedin because it does rain a bit. It's where there are rugby games. It's where we've started having concerts, with the first person or the first artist to play there being Elton John. And so it's really popular. People travel from all over the place to come to the concerts. The parking is terrible, and so are the traffic jams. I myself have been stuck in the traffic jams. You know, you're all excited, you've finished at the concert, you jump in your car, and then you're stuck in the traffic jams for about an hour and a half before you can actually start moving. So knowing this and having talked to friends, I decided to start a ferry service from Portobello and Port Chalmers, where there's quite a bit of accommodation, especially out at Portobello. It's on the tourist route on the peninsula. Yeah. It's become a really, really popular service to go from Portobello in particular down the harbour to the stadium, where there's a wharf across the road. And so people can go into the stadium for their concert, come back out, I take them back, we can have drinks on board. We've got a liquor license. So it's become quite the thing.
Fantastic. Well, that's good. Look, a lot of cities around the world have a ferry service, and so it's wonderful that you're, for the last, since 2018, I believe you started. Yeah, yep. It's absolutely wonderful. And I know, being a sometimes Portobello resident ourselves, we're really looking forward to using the service, in particular getting our bikes across to Port Chalmers, so we can explore the other side without having a long trip involved. So we're really looking forward to that when we're able to travel again. So Rachel, it's been really good catching up and understanding a bit more about your business, and what a wonderful office you have out there in some of the most beautiful part of the world, in what's widely known as one of the cleanest harbours in the world as well. So you're very lucky.
Yeah, I am very lucky. Yeah, and I know it. We all know it here.
Yeah, and we're delighted to be able to somehow be involved in telling the story, and hoping that some of our viewers and some of our friends will actually put you definitely on their list when they come and visit Dunedin.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, bye for now.